What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another segment of HR Heretics. Kelli, we got another Dear Heretics coming at you. And this one's about calibration sessions. I just went through performance review talent calibrations at my company and often found myself conflicted on how much I should be facilitating the process versus giving my opinions on individual talent. I feel like doing that isn't remaining neutral. How should I think about balancing this? What's your take, Kelli?
That's a great one. And it also parallels the question that we often get, and I've experienced, is offsites. You know, when you're facilitating your executive offsite and you're trying to contribute, and what does that look like? It is a fine line, you know what I mean? Because our role is to facilitate these calibration sessions, you know, hold folks accountable to the principles of your company, to all the ground rules of these sessions, and make sure that you're eliciting the right level of feedback and honesty. And then on the other hand, you have a lot of experience with these folks, especially more senior level folks. And so how do you balance owning the process with participating in it as a participant? I actually think both things are necessary, which makes it so much harder, because it's not like the easy thing is to say someone else facilitate it and I'm going to, you know, participate and give a ton of feedback, or I'm not going to say anything about talent and I'm just going to facilitate the process. And I do believe you have to balance both.
Yeah. I think this is a fundamental question that should not be answered during calibration and instead should be answered before. So, in fact, like it's a great question because it's making me rethink like how I've always done it. And this is what's happened to me historically, which is, okay, you know, we just did the 9-box or whatever scoring system we did this year, which is different than last year because it's always fucking iterating. And then, right. And then it's like, oh my God, like, it took longer than expected, or there was more work than I thought. And then calibration happens and you're kind of just like scrambling to like, oh my God, I barely slept last night. Like, you know, here we are. Now let's go calibrate.
And you know, by the way, that there is an 11-box as well.
I don't know. Jesus.
You know this?
I was just like, let's just boil the ocean while we're at it. Anyways, okay. So here's the thing. This question made me think about it and be like, I think we should spend way more time at the front end of this to say, how are we going to run this process? Who is going to opine in the room? And then who is the decider of the final score? Because oftentimes it kind of ends up being consensus-y. Or senior person wins sort of a thing. And that's fine. Like, that's totally fine if that's what your process is. But I have historically found that it's actually not codified. And if you take the time on the front end to codify how the calibration will work, then we could just be like, well, this is what we had agreed to, so let's stick to these rules and this is how we should do it. Now, to answer the question specifically, I absolutely think whoever this HR person is should be opining, right? Like, if you have data on the person, then you should explain what that data is in the calibration session. That is the whole purpose of it. The problem is if you're judge, jury, and executioner, then everyone's going to think you're heavy-handed and, you know, you're in charge of these things. And I actually think HR should not be in charge of actually setting the rating for the employee unless it's on the HR team.
Right. Yes. I totally agree. So I've heard a lot of beliefs that the HR person is like the secret decider. And
yes,
they're sitting there. And to your point, please make that clear before you start calibration. That's really helpful, because when you opine, as you and I both are agreeing, it's not from a place of like coercion, power, decision-making process.
Invisible hand.
Invisible hand. Yeah. Which I actually like that. It's just in a more positive way. That can be another segment. So what I do, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but what I do is I usually insert last. And someone asked me this recently, and my response was, your participation should be very thoughtful, to be extremely objective and not final, right? To present your view as data points, just like everyone else, because they'll hear it differently from you. They'll be like, oh, that must be it then. This person is That's not true. So make sure you use a disclaimer saying this is from my observations or whatnot, if helpful. Remain as objective as possible. I have heard, folks in HR opine it's based on like one shitty behavior pattern or what they said at like a cocktail party. Like that's not objective, right?
Yeah.
And so it has to be things that are related to the business, related to the job frameworks, related to the level and how you think about those at your company and the values in a way where that leader can take it just like everyone else's information and distill it.
Yeah. Just like most things that HR has to handle, I always subscribe to the New York Times test, which is if what we are saying behind closed doors ends up on the front page of the New York Times, are we going to be okay with it? Like, obviously, we don't want it to get out, but like, are we going to be okay with it and can we defend it? And that's always been my philosophy is like, yes, like we're not trying to have these conversations more publicly because it will cause more harm than good and be a distraction. But in a world in which it gets out, we must be able to defend it in a professional and an objective way.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deal, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelli sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Kelli, talk to me a little bit about like, just kind of going back to first principles of calibration. Why do we do it? And what is it for? Like, what is the purpose?
Yeah, it's a very artful process. Do you know what I mean? Like some people love it, some people hate it. In my opinion, we do this so that the company can hold a consistent bar and build muscle about talking about alike talent as they relate to one another. These are areas to make sure that we are not just like rating Nolan in a vacuum and then all of his peers. It's to protect against the natural subjectivity and bias that humans have, in my opinion. Not just on a one team, like not just within marketing, but ideally across the whole company, right? Which is why I love the higher level cross-functional look and talking about things related to the universal career frameworks, right? A director of marketing, director of engineering, director of finance. You should be able to calibrate those folks at the first order of how your company thinks about those levels, even though within their groups, they're doing it deep, also including technical and functional skills of that area.
Yeah.
And the other side of the calibration for me that a lot of companies miss, Nolan, is at least half of it is forward looking. So half the calibration is performance and how folks are doing and being equitable, fair, and, having parity against like roles. I don't think we spend enough time talking about, so what are we going to do with this person? Independent of the function, who are our nodes across the company and our bets on people and leaders? What are we doing to keep them? How are we going to work with them? Can they jump into different functions? Succession planning and single points of failure is a big problem in organizations.
Yeah.
So do we talk about that? So I aim to talk about that 50% of the time, and the other part 50% of the time. The problem is a lot of companies are so immature in the first part. They spend the whole time talking, just trying to get a handle on that, which makes sense because it's an imperfect, hard process.
Yeah. Yeah. The first part is to get it perfect is a fool's errand. It's not possible. So what I've seen is typically there's, the manager calibration, right? Which gets run through the HRBP. The HRBP will flag anything they think is a little off before it goes up to either the director or the VP of the org. Then the director or VP of the org will look at it, then kind of make their marks. And then when you walk into the room, when you're talking about the level or promotions that are under question, right? It's usually somebody's like flagged something, and then that's the only time we have a live discussion about that thing. And then creating the sacred space to actually have the discussion around your go forward talent plan, because there's no other time to do it. I've never seen another company do it outside of the calibration session. And so that's actually, I totally agree with you, Kelli, that nobody talks about. It's like we get so wrapped around the axle for the rating and promotions and like debating these things, when the way more important discussion is, what are we doing with this person? What are we expecting from them in the next 6 months? How do we make sure, like, if they decide to leave, we have a backup plan, and those sorts of things.
Yeah. And some indications of that, like if there are superstars at your company that I've seen it so many times, then all of a sudden they're leaving. They're like, you're literally one of our biggest bets. You're wonderful. No one's ever told me that. Never heard that.
Exactly.
Talked about options, which goes back to a session we did a few days ago or last week around retaining top talent and how you do that.
Yeah.
The other thing, Nolan, is again, these are all layers of evolution and maturity. Like you can't just go do these things unless the foundation below it is strong,
Yeah.
But ultimately, these things are transparent across the company. Every employee knows that,
Exactly.
you do calibrate talent. Every employee knows how you do it. Let's just say use a 9-box. Ideally, I am showing you this 9-box and being like, here's where you're at. Here's why. Here's how I'd love to talk about what you want to do next or where we want to go. It's a really powerful visual. It's almost like comp transparency. You can't do that unless you have such a good handle on your process and your philosophies and all the corner cases and why you do it. The trick is, and the HR team can't just have that, or a few executives. Every manager has to internalize that and be great at it before you make those things transparent.
Yeah. And these things they're iterative approaches, right? The first time you do it, it's like nobody knows what's happening, basically. Right? It's a disaster.
And so we should be okay with that.
That's my point.
It's
exactly. Like set the expectation that we're building a muscle here, and it's like going to the gym. It's like you don't go to the gym one time and get jacked. Like that's just not how it works. In fact, like we have to eat right all the time.
That's
and like
what
we
you
have to
told
get
me
on.
happens to you. You told me you go to the gym and
Definitely not. I do not have that genetic bug. My buddy Ryan does. He works out for a week and is jacked. But like that's just the reality of the thing. Is just like we have to eat right all the time. We have to have a consistent basis of when we do this. And then as time goes on, it's progressive overload. It's like, great, well, we did this last time. Now we can take a step forward. Most importantly, though, where the analogy doesn't hold is setting those expectations with the company. So everyone is aware of like what we're doing. So it doesn't become this like, calibration day. Like there they go into the room. I wonder who they're talking shit about now, which is how this thing devolves into so many companies and it becomes super toxic.
Yeah. And I'll leave like one of my last points is a real one. So, I'm doing an interim CPO role at Quizlet for the entire year. We're going through this. We just went through the end of year calibration. Kind of like you said, hot mess, some good spots, just kind of fine. Only the executives use 9-box and whatnot. So we're like, we're doing this every 6 months, building muscle. Yeah. I think every 3 months is like quite the gauntlet.
Too much.
To put the company through when they're trying to execute a business. So
probably a touch point though, right?
Maybe. But in this case, we need to, like I was going to say, so we're doing it every 6 months to build muscle. And this next one, we're having every manager work the 9-box and get comfortable with it. And so we're going to spend the next 3 months wrapping everyone's head around the 9-box, what it means, how to use it, potential, succession planning, so we can apply it at the mid-year and hopefully keep building the muscle and get jacked.
Yeah. Here's the short story for everybody is that this is an imperfect process, right? Every company is different in how they do it. That's what's so fun about the space is that we can all learn from each other. So let us know in the comments, like what you guys do, what's been working for you. Also, like, let us know if you feel safe, what's not worked, because that's also helpful for people. And this is how the profession continues to progress. So please share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what you guys think.
Thanks all.
See ya.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.